Sayla stared at the document on the mahogany desk, then up at his face. Her mind was racing, struggling to process a reality that didn't fit into any category she had ever known. Because this man, this sharp, weathered Korean man in a suit that cost more than her apartment, was sitting in a shadow-filled office offering her a life she hadn't even dared to dream of. Behind her, Bianca Ross went perfectly still, her breath catching in a way that wasn't about surprise, but about the sudden, sharp realization of a loss of control. In that silence, the pity Bianca had always used to mask her superiority curdled into a dark, pure envy. If this story already has you gripped, then smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we bring you powerful stories of transformation just like this. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's take you back to the beginning, to the days when Sayla was invisible, and the world made sure she knew it. The Sterling Heights Medical Center was a place of sterile white halls and endless glass that Sayla knew only by the dirt she scrubbed from them. It was a job that paid the minimum, demanded the maximum, and forgot you existed the moment you clocked out, like a machine that consumes a person's youth and expects them to be grateful for the electricity. Sayla had no memory of a time when she wasn't tired. It was just a shape that poverty makes in a human soul. You would think that the shared struggle of the working poor would build a sanctuary of kindness. You would think the women scrubbing alongside her would form a sisterhood of we are all in this together. But it didn't work that way for Sayla, because Sayla was a charity case, and at the hospital and in her own neighborhood, that was its own kind of prison sentence. While the other workers had their gossip and their small escapes, Sayla had the heavy, suffocating weight of being the one who needed help. Her desperation made her a target for everyone's unsolicited advice and mercy. People felt they owned a piece of her because she had so little. At the bus stop, in the break room, and especially in Bianca's living room, Sayla's life was public property. You're so lucky I have these old clothes for you, Sayla. How are you going to feed that baby on this wage? You should be more grateful that people look out for you. She heard it so many times it stopped sounding like condescension and started sounding like the absolute truth. It was a fact, documented and filed. Sayla Vance was a woman who owed the world for the very air she breathed. She learned to move quietly, to accept gifts that felt like insults, and to live her life as if she were constantly apologizing for taking up space. The sun wasn't even up yet, but Maya was already tired. The apartment was cold, and the radiator made a clicking sound that never actually turned into heat. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at a pile of bills that seemed to grow every time she blinked. In the quiet of the morning, the city outside felt like a giant machine that didn't care if she lived or died. It was a heavy kind of silence, the kind that makes your chest feel tight. She looked at her daughter, Lily, who was still asleep on the couch. Lily's small face was peaceful, unaware that they only had $10 left until Friday. Maya wanted to give her the world, but most days she could barely give her a warm meal. Being a single mother in a place like this felt like trying to swim against a tide that only wanted to pull you under. People walked past her on the sidewalk every day without looking her in the eye. To the rest of the world, she was just a shadow in a faded coat. Maya worked 2 jobs, but the money disappeared into rent and bus passes before she could even hold it. Her hands were always sore from scrubbing floors, and her back ached from standing at the register. The worst part wasn't the hard work, though. It was the feeling that she was invisible. She was a ghost in her own life, screaming for help while everyone else kept their headphones on and their heads down. "Mama," Lily whispered, rubbing her eyes as she woke up. Maya forced a smile, hiding the stack of bills under a newspaper. "I'm here, baby. Go get dressed for school." As she watched Lily walk to the bathroom, Maya felt a lump in her throat. She was tired of being strong. She was tired of the silence that filled their home because she was too exhausted to speak. She needed a break. She needed someone to see her, not as a worker or a bill payer, but as a person who was drowning. Then, the mail slid through the door. Usually, it was just more bad news in white envelopes. But today, there was something different. A thick, cream-colored envelope sat on top of the pile. It didn't look like a bill. It looked like an invitation. Maya picked it up with shaking fingers. The weight of it felt strange in her hand, like it held a secret. For the first time in a long time, the heavy silence in the room felt like it was waiting for something to happen. She tore the edge of the paper, her heart beating fast against her ribs, wondering if the city had finally decided to see her after all. The rain was coming down in thick sheets, making the street lights look like blurry yellow spots. Sayla pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. She had just finished her late shift, and her feet felt like heavy stones. As she hurried toward the bus stop, she saw a black car parked near the curb. A man in a very expensive suit was getting out, juggling a phone and a large leather bag. He looked like he belonged in a tall glass building, not on this muddy corner. As the man stepped onto the sidewalk, a small, dark object fell out of his pocket. It hit the wet ground with a soft thud, but the man didn't hear it. He kept walking quickly toward the entrance of a nearby hotel. Sayla paused. Her first thought was to keep walking. She was tired, she was cold, and her own pockets were empty. She looked down and saw a thick leather wallet lying in a puddle. She picked it up. It was heavy and felt smooth. When she peeked inside, her breath caught in her throat. There was more money in that wallet than she earned in 6 months. It was enough to pay her rent, buy Lily new shoes, and finally fill the fridge with good food. For a split second, the temptation was a sharp pain in her chest. The city had taken so much from her. Maybe this was the city finally giving something back. But then, she thought of Lily's face. She thought about the lessons she taught her daughter about being a person of honor, even when life was hard. Sayla shook her head to clear the dark thoughts. She turned and ran through the rain toward the man. "Sir, wait," she called out, her voice cracking. The man stopped and turned around. He had sharp, dark eyes and a face that looked like it was carved from marble. He looked surprised to see a woman in a faded coat running toward him. Sayla reached him, breathing hard, and held out the wet wallet. "You dropped this," she said simply. The man, Jaquan, looked at the wallet and then back at Sayla. He didn't take it right away. He studied her face, noticing her tired eyes and her soaked clothes. He knew exactly how much cash was in there. Most people in this neighborhood would have disappeared into the shadows with it. "You ran back for this?" Jay asked. His voice was deep and calm. "It isn't mine," Sayla replied. She pressed the wallet into his hand. "Have a good night, sir." As she turned to walk away, Jay felt a strange spark of interest. He saw thousands of people every day, but he rarely saw someone who chose the hard truth over an easy lie. "Wait," Jay called out. Sayla stopped and looked back. "What is your name?" "Sayla," she said, before disappearing into the rain. Jay watched her go, a small, thoughtful smile playing on his lips. He didn't just see a woman in a wet coat anymore. He saw someone rare. The iron gates of the Kwan estate opened slowly, like the mouth of a giant beast. Sayla sat in the back of a sleek, black car, her hands pressed tightly together in her lap. She had never seen a house this big outside a movie. Most people in this neighborhood would have disappeared into the shadows with it. "You ran back for this?" Jay asked. His voice was deep and calm. "It isn't mine," Sayla replied. She pressed the wallet into his hand. "Have a good night, sir." As she turned to walk away, Jay felt a strange spark of interest. He saw thousands of people every day, but he rarely saw someone who chose the hard truth over an easy lie. "Wait," Jay called out. Sayla stopped and looked back. "What is your name?" "Sayla," she said, before disappearing into the rain. Jay watched her go, a small, thoughtful smile playing on his lips. He didn't just see a woman in a wet coat anymore. He saw someone rare. The iron gates of the Kwan estate opened slowly, like the mouth of a giant beast. Sayla sat in the back of a sleek, black car, her hands pressed tightly together in her lap. She had never seen a house this big outside a movie. As they drove up the long, winding path, she saw rows of perfectly trimmed trees and statues that looked old and expensive. It was a world away from the cracked sidewalks and gray buildings of her neighborhood. To her, this place felt like a beautiful cage made of gold and stone. When the car stopped, a man in a sharp suit opened her door. Sayla stepped out and looked up at the massive front doors. Her heart was thumping against her ribs. She felt small, like a tiny bird lost in a storm. She smoothed out her best dress, which suddenly felt cheap and thin under the bright lights of the entryway. She was here for a job, but she felt like she was stepping into a different dimension. Inside, the floor was made of white marble, so shiny she could see her own nervous reflection. The air smelled like expensive wood and old books. Everything was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than the one in her apartment. This silence felt heavy with power and secrets. Men in dark suits stood in the corners of the rooms. They didn't move or speak, but their eyes followed her every step. It was then that Selah realized this wasn't just a rich man's home. It was a fortress. Jae-kwon was waiting for her in a large room filled with paintings. He looked even more intimidating than he had in the rain. He didn't smile, but he gestured for her to sit down. "Welcome, Selah," he said. His voice was like low thunder. "My world is not an easy one. There are rules here that must never be broken." Selah looked around at the cold, beautiful room. She saw a group of men whispering in a corner, their faces hard and serious. One of them shifted his coat, and she caught a quick flash of metal at his belt. Her breath hitched. She wasn't just a maid or an assistant. She was now standing in the heart of a mafia empire. The culture shock hit her like a wave of cold water. In her world, danger was a dark alley or a missed paycheck. Here, danger wore a silk tie and lived in a palace. Despite the fear, Selah squared her shoulders. She thought of Lily and the bills on her table. She had crossed the threshold, and there was no going back now. She would have to learn to walk among the lions without being eaten. She looked Jae-kwon in the eye and nodded. She was ready to work, even if this new world felt like a beautiful nightmare. Selah gripped her purse tightly as she walked through the store. For the first time in years, she didn't have to look at the price tags and do mental math in her head. The paycheck from the Kwon estate was more money than she had ever seen at once. It felt heavy and powerful in her bag. She went straight to the section with the bright lights and the softest clothes. She picked out a thick, blue sweater for her son, Toby. It was warm and made of real wool, not the thin, scratchy kind that lost its shape after one wash. She also bought him a set of brand-new drawing pencils and a sketchbook with thick, white pages. She could almost see his eyes lighting up when he saw them. When she got back to the estate to start her evening shift, she felt like she was walking on air. She took the servant's entrance, but as she was putting her coat away, she ran into Bianca. Bianca was Jae-kwon's sister, and she always looked like she had just stepped out of fashion magazine. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than Selah's entire neighborhood. "Oh, Selah," Bianca said, leaning against the doorframe. Her voice was sweet like honey, but it had a sharp edge. "I see you've been shopping. Is that for the little boy you're always talking about?" "Yes, it's a gift for my son," Selah said, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt a sudden urge to hide the shopping bag behind her back. Bianca reached out and touched the sleeve of the blue sweater with one long, manicured fingernail. She made a small face, like she had touched something dirty. "How sweet. It's very bright, isn't it? I suppose it's fine for people who don't know any better. But the material is quite cheap, dear. It will likely fall apart in a month." Selah felt the warmth leave her face. The joy of the gift began to shrink. "And that dress you're wearing today," Bianca continued, looking Selah up and down. "It's a nice color, but the fit is all wrong for a house like this. It makes you look a bit messy. We have a reputation to keep here, you know. My brother might have hired you for your honesty, but honesty doesn't fix a lack of style." Selah swallowed hard. She wanted to say that the dress was the best one she owned, and that the sweater was a treasure to her. But she knew that in this house, words were like weapons. Bianca wasn't just giving advice. She was marking her territory. She wanted Selah to know that no matter how much money she earned, she would never truly belong in their world. Selah gripped the bag until her knuckles turned white. She wouldn't let Bianca see her cry. She nodded quietly and moved past her, the weight of the gold-trimmed walls feeling heavier than ever before. Toby would love the sweater, she told herself, but the sting of Bianca's words followed her all the way down the hall. The grand office at the end of the hall was a place most workers feared to enter. It was Jae-kwon's private space, filled with the scent of leather and cold air. Selah was there to polish the large mahogany desk, But as she worked, her eyes drifted to a map spread out across the table. It was a map of the city's shipping docks, marked with red and blue ink. She didn't mean to stare, but she noticed a pattern in the markings that didn't seem right. "You're looking at the routes," a voice said from the shadows. Sayla jumped, nearly dropping her cloth. Jay was standing by the window, watching her. She looked down at the floor quickly. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just cleaning. Tell me what you see," Jay commanded, walking toward the desk. He wasn't angry. He sounded curious. Sayla hesitated, then pointed to a cluster of blue marks near the North Harbor. "The trucks are moving in circles here. If they took the bridge road instead, they would save 2 hours and stay away from the police station on 5th Street. It's a simpler path." Jay looked at the map, then back at Sayla. He stayed quiet for a long time, his sharp eyes measuring her. He had hired her because she was honest, but he was starting to realize she was also very bright. Most people in his world were too afraid to speak up or too greedy to think clearly. Sayla saw things as they truly were. "Put the cloth down, Sayla," Jay said quietly. "From now on, someone else will handle the cleaning. I have enough people who can scrub floors. I don't have enough people I can trust to think." Sayla felt a rush of heat in her cheeks. "Sir, you will work in the operations room," Jay continued. "You will watch the schedules and help plan the movements. It is a big responsibility, and the stakes are much higher. In this room, a mistake doesn't just mean a dirty floor. It means someone gets hurt." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Do you think you can handle being in the shadow of a man like me? People will look at you differently now. They will wonder why a woman from the streets is sitting at the table with the bosses." Sayla thought about her life before the estate, the cold apartment, the empty fridge, and the way the city ignored her. She wasn't afraid of hard work, and she wasn't afraid of the dark. She looked at the map again, seeing the paths clearly in her mind. She realized that her mind was a tool, one she had never been allowed to use until now. "I can handle it," Sayla said, her voice stronger than before. Jay nodded once. "Good. Follow me. Your new life starts today." As they walked out of the office together, Sayla felt the weight of her new role. She was no longer just a ghost in a faded coat. She was becoming a part of the machine, moving from the edges of the room to the very center of the power. Sayla sat at her new desk in the operations room, looking at the glowing computer screens. Her fingers moved over the keys as she tracked the delivery trucks moving across the city. She felt proud of her work, but she also felt the eyes of the other guards watching her. They didn't understand why Jay had chosen her. The air in the room felt thick and heavy, like a storm was coming. Later that afternoon, Sayla went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. She found Bianca standing there, looking at her reflection in a silver tray. Bianca didn't look happy. She looked like someone who had just tasted something bitter. When she saw Sayla, she put the tray down and walked over with a slow, fake smile. "You look very busy, Sayla," Bianca said, her voice dropping to a low whisper. "My brother seems to think you are quite special. He has never moved someone from the cleaning staff to the inner circle so quickly." "I'm just doing my best to help, Miss Bianca," Sayla replied, keeping her voice polite. Bianca stepped closer, so close that Sayla could smell her expensive perfume. "You think you're safe because he's being kind to you now, but you don't know Jay like I do. He doesn't see people as friends or even as humans. He sees them as tools. Right now, you are a useful tool because you are smart and honest. But the moment you make one mistake, he will throw you away without a second thought." Sayla felt a cold chill run down her spine, but she didn't move. She didn't want Bianca to see that she was scared. "He has a dark side that would make your blood turn to ice," Bianca continued, her eyes narrowing. "Do you really think a man in his position got there by being nice? There are secrets in this house that would break a woman like you. You should leave now while you still have your dignity. If you stay, he will change you. He will turn your heart into stone, just like his." Sayla thought about the way Jay had looked at the map with her. He had been serious, but he hadn't been cruel. Still, she knew Bianca had grown up in this world, and she knew its dangers better than anyone. A seed of doubt began to grow in Selah's mind. Was Jay just using her? Was she just a part of a game she didn't understand? "Think about your son Toby, Bianca whispered, leaning in even closer. What happens to him if you get caught up in Jay's shadows? This isn't a game for little girls. It's a war. Bianca patted Selah on the shoulder and walked away, leaving the room cold and quiet. Selah stood by the sink, holding her glass of water. Her hand was shaking just a little bit. She looked out the window at the tall gates of the estate. For the first time since she arrived, the golden walls felt less like a dream and more like a trap. She wondered if her honesty was enough to keep her safe in a place where envy was a virus that could kill. The ballroom was filled with the sound of clinking glass and soft music. Huge crystal lights hung from the ceiling, making everything sparkle like a field of stars. Selah stood at Jay's side, wearing a simple black dress that felt much fancier than anything she had ever touched. She wasn't there to clean the floors this time. She held a small tablet in her hands, keeping track of the names and faces of the powerful people walking through the door. Jay had told her that information was the most valuable thing in the room, and she was the one holding it. Every time a guest approached, Jay would lean in slightly, and Selah would whisper a few details about them. She told him who owned which shipping company and who was having trouble with their bank. Jay would nod, his face calm and serious, and then use those secrets to win his arguments. Selah felt like a shadow, invisible but important. For the first time, she wasn't just watching the world of the rich from the outside. She was right in the middle of it, helping the most powerful man in the room stay on top. However, the air in the ballroom didn't feel light or happy to Selah. It felt tight and dangerous. Across the room, near a wall covered in flowers, Bianca stood with a group of her friends. She was wearing a dress that shimmered with gold, but her face was dark. She didn't look at the dancers or the food. Her eyes were fixed on Selah, following her every move with a look of pure hatred. To Bianca, Selah was a virus that had entered her home and was now infecting her brother's business. She couldn't understand why Jay would choose a woman from the streets to be his right hand. Selah could feel Bianca's stare like a cold wind on her back. Every time she looked up, she saw Bianca whispering to the people around her, pointing a gloved finger toward Jay and Selah. The vitriol in Bianca's eyes made Selah's stomach turn. She remembered the warning from the kitchen. Bianca wasn't just jealous. She was waiting for Selah to trip so she could watch her fall. "Stay focused," Jay said softly, not looking away from the man he was talking to. He had noticed Selah's distraction. The lions only bite when they see you are afraid. Selah took a deep breath and straightened her back. She looked away from Bianca and focused on the screen in her hands. She thought about Toby and the warm house they now had. She couldn't afford to let Bianca's anger stop her. Even though she felt like an imposter in a room full of giants, she knew she was the one Jay trusted. As the night went on, the music seemed to get louder, and the stakes grew higher. Selah realized that this gala wasn't just a party. It was a battlefield, and she was standing right next to the general. Bianca watched from the sidelines, her heart filled with bitterness, as Selah proved she belonged in the light. The morning air inside the Quan estate felt different. It was cold and sharp like the edge of a knife. Selah walked into the operations room, expecting to start her usual work, but she stopped when she saw the look on Jay's face. He was standing by the large monitors, his hands behind his back. The screens weren't showing truck routes or shipping docks today. Instead, they were filled with news headlines. Jay's private life was all over the internet. Specifically, information about his young son, who was usually kept hidden for his own safety, had been leaked to the public. "Selah," Jay said, his voice so quiet it was scary. "Do you know how this happened?" Selah felt her heart drop into her stomach. "No, sir. I have no idea. I would never say anything about your family." Before Jay could speak, Bianca stepped out from the shadows of the doorway. She was holding a small, silver tablet and wearing a look of fake sadness. "Brother, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but I saw Selah near your private files last night. She said she was just cleaning, but she had her phone out. I didn't want to think the worst of her, but now this happens." Selah's eyes widened. "That's not true. I wasn't anywhere near those files. I was at the gala with Jay all night." "You were left alone for 20 minutes while we spoke to the senator," Bianca replied quickly, her voice smooth and convincing. "And I notice you've been making a lot of phone calls lately. Are you trying to get more money for that son of yours? Is the paycheck we give you not enough?" Jay turned his gaze towards Selah. His eyes, which had started to show a bit of warmth over the last few weeks, were now like blocks of ice. In his world, a leak wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal that put a child's life in danger. He looked at the tablet Bianca held, which showed a log of someone accessing the files using Selah's digital password. "I trusted you," Jay said. The words felt heavier than a physical blow. "I didn't do it," Selah cried, her voice trembling. "Someone must have stolen my password. Miss Bianca, please tell him the truth." Bianca just shook her head, looking down at the floor as if she were disappointed. "The evidence is right here, Jay. She's the only one who had the chance. She's from the streets. She doesn't understand loyalty the way we do." Selah looked from Jay's cold face to Bianca's hidden, cruel smile. She realized then that the warning in the kitchen and the glares at the gala were all leading to this. Bianca had been planting seeds of doubt for days, and now she had finally pulled the trap shut. Selah was the prime suspect, and in the Mafia world, being a suspect was just as dangerous as being guilty. The walls of the golden cage were closing in, and for the first time, Selah didn't know if her honesty would be enough to save her. She stood in the center of the room, a lone figure surrounded by power and lies, wondering if this was the end of the dream she had worked so hard to build. The heavy doors of Jay's private study slammed shut with a sound like a thunderclap. Jay sat behind his desk, but he didn't look like a boss anymore. He looked like a father who was scared and angry. The room was dark, except for one lamp that cast long, sharp shadows across the floor. Selah stood in the center of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt like a small animal caught in a trap, but she forced herself to keep her head up. "You have one chance to tell me the truth, Selah," Jay said. His voice was cold, like a winter wind. "My son's safety is the only thing that matters to me. If you sold that information, there is no place on earth where you can hide." "I did not do it, Jay," Selah said, using his name for the first time. She didn't sound like a servant anymore. She sounded like a woman who had nothing left to lose but her honor. "You hired me because I returned a wallet full of cash when I was starving. Why would I betray you now when you have given me everything?" Jay leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "The computer logs show your password was used. Bianca saw you near the files. The evidence is all pointing at you." Selah took a deep breath. She remembered the way Bianca had touched the silver tray in the kitchen and the way she had whispered about tools. A thought suddenly clicked in her mind. "The logs say the files were opened at 10 o'clock last night, right? During the gala?" Jay nodded slowly. "Yes, while we were talking to the guests." "Check the security cameras for the hallway near the office," Selah said, her voice growing stronger. "But don't just look for me. Look for anyone wearing a gold dress." Bianca left the ballroom for 15 minutes to fix her makeup. I remember because she bumped into me on her way out, and I smelled that expensive perfume of hers. "She didn't go to the restroom, Jay. She went to your office." Jay's face remained still, but his fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. He turned to his computer and typed quickly. For several minutes, the only sound in the room was the ticking of a clock on the wall. Selah held her breath. She knew that if the cameras didn't show the truth, her life and Toby's future would be over. Finally, Jay turned the screen around. The grainy black and white footage showed a woman in a shimmering gold dress entering the office. She wasn't hiding. She walked straight to the computer, typed in a code, and then left just as quickly. It was Bianca. She had used Selah's password, which she must have stolen from the operations room earlier that day. Jay stared at the screen for a long time. The anger in his eyes shifted from Selah to the image of his own sister. He realized that Bianca's envy was so deep that she was willing to put his own son in danger just to get rid of a woman she looked down on. "I am sorry, Selah," Jay said quietly. He looked older than he had a few minutes ago. "I let my fear cloud my judgment. You stayed loyal even when I turned against you." Selah felt the tension leave her body, but she didn't smile. She realized that in this world, even the people you trust can become your enemies in a second. "What happens now?" she asked. Jay stood up, and straightened his suit jacket. His face turned back into a mask of stone. "Now," he said, "I deal with my sister. And you? You're no longer just an assistant. You're the only person in this house I truly trust." He walked to the door and opened it, letting the light from the hallway flood into the dark room. The trial was over, but Selah knew the war inside the estate was just beginning. The air in the grand hallway was finally clear, as if a heavy smoke had been blown away by a strong wind. Selah stood at the top of the marble staircase, watching as two guards carried several leather suitcases toward the front door. Bianca followed them, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She wasn't wearing her shimmering gold dress today. Instead, she wore a simple gray coat that made her look small and ordinary. She stopped for a moment and looked up at Selah, her mouth opening as if she wanted to say one last cruel thing. But when she saw Jay standing right behind Selah, she looked away and walked out into the rain. The heavy iron gates clicked shut, and for the first time, the estate felt like a home instead of a battlefield. Jay turned to Selah, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "She will not be coming back," he said. "She chose her own path when she put my son in danger. In this world, there is no room for people who trade loyalty for a chance to be cruel." He led Selah back into the large operations room, but he didn't point toward the small desk in the corner. Instead, he walked to the center of the room, where a large wooden table sat under a bright light. This was the place where the biggest decisions were made. He pulled out a chair for her, a chair that had always been empty until now. "You are no longer a maid, and you are more than just an assistant," Jay said, looking her in the eye. "You saw the truth when everyone else was blinded by lies. You protected my family when my own blood was trying to tear it apart." Selah sat down, her fingers tracing the smooth wood of the table. She thought about where she was just a few months ago, sitting at a cold kitchen table, crying over bills she couldn't pay. She thought about the faded coat she used to wear and the way people looked right through her on the street. Now, she was wearing a suit that fit her perfectly, and her name was whispered with respect by the men in the dark suits. She wasn't a shadow anymore. She was a partner. "We have a lot of work to do," Selah said, her voice steady and full of confidence. She looked at the screens, which were now filled with new plans and safer routes. She knew there would still be dangers, and she knew the city outside was still a hard place for many people. But she also knew she had the power to change things now. Jay nodded and sat across from her. "Then let's begin." As they started to work, Selah felt a sense of peace she had never known. She had climbed a mountain that most people didn't even know existed. She had kept her heart kind and her mind sharp, even when the world tried to break her. As the sun began to rise over the tall gates of the estate, Selah looked out the window and smiled. The old life was gone, and the new empire was just beginning. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally in control.